Hello guys, David Vos here. Another day here in Alabama. Still raining. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Friends, I want to read in the Bible in Genesis chapter 28 and maybe 29 in this area. My friend Joshua had been reading in this area and was telling me about how deep this is. And there's a story here that is very symbolic. And we've talked about it, and lots of people have talked about. This is kind of where Jacob sets up the stone and anoints it and calls it Bethel. So this is the place of the worship of El. But we really need to understand what this worship is, the worship of El, the true place of promise, the true divine being. And we're going to find out that in the very esoteric wisdom that is given to us here in Genesis, written by Moses, that the intentions of Moses was not to teach some carnal law by Yahweh, but to teach that Yahweh was this lower egotistical part of the universe that we see, the material, and when we are here, we're under these harsh conditions, and that it is a part of the reality that we call the other half, or the darkness that's, on one side of the wheel is light, and the other side is darkness, and El is on one side and Yahweh on the other. And that they're both parts of our world, that we should have the light shining over the darkness to conquer the darkness. The only purpose for the darkness is our schooling that leads to light, the sunrise. And we're going to talk about that here. We'll show that the story is brilliant. It is beautiful. You've probably never in your life ever heard any of this. And yet it's right there in the verses if we have the eyes to see. So I'm just going to start reading in Genesis chapter 28, verse 1. It says, Isaac calleth unto Jacob. Okay, first of all, to start off, who's Isaac and who's Jacob? Right? This is not some person we don't know by some name that we've heard over and over again, but okay, some person in history. That would not be helpful for us upon whom the ends of this world has come, because it was all written as a warning upon whom the ends of the system or the world has come. And so it's written for us. What does this word Isaac and Jacob mean? Is this more esoteric, or was it some guy just haphazardly named Isaac and Jacob? Well, let's take a look and see what these words mean. So Isaac is here, 3327. Let's take a look at what that word is. He laughs. He laughs. It's from sakak. And again, it just means to laugh. So it's just a tense of the word to laugh. Other synonyms are entertaining or jesting, making sport, or mocking. So it's not really laughing, but jeeringly mocking. So let's go back. Isaac is mocking, but we have to understand the context of this person, Isaac. One could, from that, say, okay, well, maybe then Isaac's a bad guy because he's mocking. Well, not that Isaac is the bad guy, but Isaac represents a transition in this story whereby Jacob, and we'll find out what his name means, someone who is still not yet conquered Yahweh, because he will here soon. He'll wrestle with Yahweh, overcome this world, and have his name change, his identity, to Isis Ra El, which is Israel. So, in this transition, Jacob, being the son of Isaac, is the son of a mocker. What does that mean? It means that when Abraham was given the promise, no conditions, no law, just an absolute eternal promise of the Lord's love, El's divine purpose for man, Abraham and Sarah laughed because they didn't believe it, because they still were not yet imbued with the Holy Spirit. They did not have the gnosis, because we're all in training. And so they mocked and they laughed and they jeered and they said, ha ha ha, we'll never have this. Isaac represents the child of promise, even though human beings are mocking and laughing and not even believing at the time. But it just shows that the divine purpose will be carried out in us through our lineage and through our births and through our deaths, even though we're not yet fully knowing it, nor is our faith very strong, but yet maybe we have some hope, but yet we laugh. So what is Jacob? 3290. And of course, Yah-cub. Yah is Yahweh. And the Akab, what does that mean? It means heel, footprint, or hind part. Well, now it's pretty hard to understand just from the way they try to explain it. But you see, the heel throughout the context of the entire Bible, such as that he will strike his heel, or they will send their troops and destroy people. That troop meant the stepping, the heel, the foot, to stomp something, to subdue it. So here is the subjection, subduing, the traversing with the foot and carrying out the plan. So Yahweh then, as we've noted, will be conquered, will be defeated. The darkness will be defeated. It is the plan of the light, Ra, the rays of light. And we'll see all of this here in the context. So Jacob is still in this condition where he is the person that's going to be the one who defeats and conquers and steps upon Yahweh and this old system. So let's go on. So it says, Isaac calleth unto him Jacob, and blesseth him, and commandeth him, and said to him, Thou dost not take a wife of the daughters of Canaan. Well, what is this Canaan? Let's take a look at that. 3667. And it comes from this word Cana. And that means to be humble, okay? But understand, it doesn't mean to be humble in a good way. It means to be subdued. And by the way, isn't it interesting that in the New Testament, which is written in Greek, so we can't go to this word and, well, they won't do it for you. They will tell you one thing, that the city of Cana, a city in Galilee, is of Hebrew origin, as it says, of Hebrew origin. But they don't share with you what word in Hebrew it originated from. But if you look at it, you can see the word is exactly the same, the pronunciation, as that word Cana, which is where we get the word Canaanite. Here is the word Canaan, and they say it's the territory of Canaan. But the Hebrew origin of the word Canaanite is Cana. Cana. And they then say it means to be humble, but as we will see, it means to be subdued. And that's why the land of Canaan was subdued. And that's why we always talk about subduing a woman. Because the man, being the manly, they go off to pursue the woman and subdue her, and then they become the provider. So it says, become humble, or done. To humble yourself, subdue, or to be subdued. Now remember, Canaan was on the west side of the River Jordan. And that represents, you've heard of the left brain, right brain activity. So we're going to see in this story where Jacob goes east, and some Bible translation says he goes to the Orient. Well, of course he didn't do that. He just crossed the river. He went to the east side of the river. And that river is the living waters. And we're going to see a lot of wells. And there's a well in the north, but on the east side. In other words, a spring of water coming from the east, which is the direction of the sun, but also in the north, because it was on his way from Beersheba, from the south, Sheba meaning the south, and he was on his way to Haran, which we'll talk about Haran. I'll get to the etymology of that word. And Laban, we're going to get to the etymology of that word, where they get their wives. But they didn't want to get their wives, the one who's going to, Jacob and Isaac, Isaac is the promised son. But they didn't believe, right? But there's a purpose involved here. So the purpose is that there will eventually be born a child of the light. But right now, we have got to learn and go through a classroom and be on this journey and overcome this flesh. So when you're on the west side of the river, you're on the side of the brain that just thinks consciously. On the right side of the river, which is the east, is from the light. It's from the higher source. So there's lots of words we'll discover here. On, which is high, anu, heaven, ra, El. We've got El. We've got a lot of words that we'll discuss here. But Canaan means the child that is the fleshly child on the west side in the conscious world. So we're trying to have to produce the fruit of the light on the sunny side, you see, on the blessed side, or the spiritual. So he said, I don't want you to take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. Rise, go to Pandan Aram, to the house of Bethuel. Now, interesting, Bethuel sounds a little bit like Bethel. But at this point, Bethel hadn't even been made yet. As we know, Beth and El means the house of El. Beth is the word house. But an interesting word is, and this is interesting that I don't think scholars understand this. They don't understand any of this. But Bath is a daughter. How could that be? One is a house and one is a daughter. Well, because when you say a house, you're really saying a son. Because Ben is the son and it's related to Beth or Bath. And so if it's in feminine gender, it's the daughter. But if it's not, it's just the original word, or the child, the son. And then the feminine, it's the daughter. So what we're just saying here is the child of El, the same as Bethel. But in that sense, it's the house of El. And a house, like Pharaoh, Ra is the divine light, and Fa is the house, or the lineal descendant, the kingdom of Ra. So here we have Bethuel, which is the daughter of El. So they want Isaac to go unto this area to get out of Canaan on the left side, go across to the east side, and go up to Laban's house, the house of Bethuel, or the daughter of El, thy mother's father, and take for thyself from thence a wife of the daughters of Laban. Now, who could Laban be? As we've said many times, you look it up and they'll tell you it means white. Well, perhaps it has come down in some languages to mean white, but the original meaning of that word, as we've said many times before, El is the same as La. Like we have La Azarus, or El Lazarus, right? Eleazar, El Izar, or La Azarus. It depends on what language it's come down to, or what dialect. So here, El and La is the same. What is Ban? The scholars really don't know the etymologies of these words. They don't know the history of language. They don't understand what language is. So white has come down to be a word that we use to kind of symbolize purity. And so the real meaning, or the root of this word, is not really white, but the real meaning of the root is to mean clean and pure, to be cleansed or purified. So something clean and pure, then in some contexts, if you were to say, oh, look at that, pure and clean garments, white garments, pure and clean. So a lot of people have misused these verses, maybe taking them literally, And that's what we're not supposed to do. And we'll cover more about taking it literally here in a moment. But, for instance, Laban then, they claim, if you look it up, means white. Now, if you go to the other son of Noah, which is Ham, that lineage, they claim that he means burned or black. Well, you have to understand something. They really don't know what they're talking about, because this word Ham should probably be pronounced Chem. Now, that's also where we get the word chemical. And this is where Masons and Kabbalistic teachings, they call this an alchemist. That's where we get the word chemistry. Well, what is the root of the word chemistry? What are you trying to do when you're involved with chemistry? Some have said that, and I have said this too, and I think there might be something to this, but they claim that Chem means soil. Kind of like Adam means red earth. They claim that Chem means black earth because of this dark black soil in Egypt along the river Nile. But remember, Lachem, which is the Chem, means cooked bread, processed food. This is where some say Ham gets his name as black because he's burned. You burn the food, you cook the food. So does Kim mean burned, and for that reason it's black? Or does it mean black soil? And this would probably make sense because chemicals maybe have some affiliation with the soil because of the elements? Were elements and chemicals the same? Not really. There's very little reason to believe that chemicals has anything to do with elements. However, when you're involved in chemistry, you do some cooking. You do some burning, some cooking. So the alchemist would cook up and boil things and make these potions. Chemistry is not really about the soil, is it? Nor is it really about the elements, nor anything about something black, but about something cooked. It has nothing to do really with black, just as the word Laban probably has nothing to do with the word white, except this. When you go to the north, which is just a symbol, had nothing to do with actual people. Nobody on the face of the earth will ever get their blessing from any tribe. We all get our blessings and our eternal life through Jesus Christ. He is that seed, as the Apostle Paul says, the seed not as many, but as one, which is Christ. So we're all blessed in the seed of Abraham, which is one. And not through Ham or through Laban or through anyone else or Jacob, but through Christ. The seed of Jacob, the seed of Isaac, the seed of Abraham, the seed of Adam. But all the children of Africa, China, Europe, Dan went to Europe and he's not going to be blessed. He's not mentioned among the 12 tribes. There's certainly a lot of curses in the Old Testament by Yahweh. But I have come to understand now that when you go north and you get whatever this word white means, it doesn't mean the color white, but it means to be wearing some kind of robe. So I think they're lying. I think they're perpetuating the idea that white is the good color and black is the bad color. And I think it's a racism thing. I really do. And I'll tell you what. I don't believe the word Laban has anything to do with white. I'll tell you what I do believe the word Laban means in just a minute. And I don't think that the word Ham or Chem has anything to do with the word black. As I have said, it's absolutely certain that Lachem means burned, cooked. But as we said, in the New Testament, it does say we're going to get these white robes, right? Well, there you go. They're white, right? You got to have your white robes to get into the wedding. No, not really. That word in the book of Revelation, where the great multitude is standing around his throne, they all got white robes, that's our graduation. It has nothing to do with white. Look at the word there in Greek. It's lukos. And it doesn't, now they say it means white, but they also say it means bright and brilliant. You see, it can't be both. They got a lot of these dual meanings. The only reason there's always dual meanings is because they'll give you the real meaning and then the other meaning is the one they want you to think it means. But the meaning here is not white, but it's bright. In fact, the definition, the first word is bright. The second word in the definition is white. But in usage, the first meaning is white and the second meaning is bright. So they even use it as brilliant or bright in usage. But in definition, it literally means to be bright. And so the word might mean pure. It's like pure. Has nothing to do with white. We're not going to get necessarily white robes, but we're going to get brilliant, glistening, glorified light bodies. The same thing goes for Chem. Chem has nothing to do with the word black. It doesn't have anything to do with the word soil or elements or black soil. And so it really has to do with the fact that it means to be cooked or processed. As we know, the word chemicals, chemistry, comes from cooking. But what's even more amazing is the word Laban probably doesn't have anything to do whatsoever with even brilliant or glistening or anything to do with robes. But Laban is La, El, Abba, father, El. And we'll show you that here in a minute. It's talked about all over the New Testament that we have to have our robes on to enter into the wedding. And it represents our immortality. So the other end of the spectrum is the child of Noah that is Cham, and it means burned or cooked or processed. And this is not something bad. We all have to be processed and go through the trials and tribulations of this life. And so all of these are just illustrations. Jacob is a symbol of us and things we go through. And Laban is a symbol of something that we are going to encounter. And this marriage is something we're going to do. And all the lands and places represents spiritual things. And so we shouldn't, as the Apostle Paul says, be following after these Judean myths or fables, nor should we follow after their genealogies, imagining it somehow or another, if we have this particular pedigree or genealogy, that we're greater or better than anyone. Because as Jesus says, let him who is your leader be your servant. And it says the divine Almighty, this is not Yahweh here, the divine Almighty doth bless thee. Not Yahweh. You will become an assembly of peoples or congregation of many peoples. This is the same blessing that El Elyon gave to Abraham, and now it's being given here to Jacob and Isaac. So it says that the divine Almighty doth bless thee and make thee fruitful and multiply thee, and thou hast become an assembly of peoples. And he doth give unto thee the blessing of Abraham, as we said. To thee and to thy seed, with thee. So this blessing is to be gradual and is to take place at the end of the course as these individuals go through and purify and go towards the light. So he wants to cause you to possess the land of your sojournings, which the divine gave to Abraham and Isaac. Sendeth away Jacob, and he goeth to Padan Aram, which is that Haran, which later became Aram from the Armenians, so they call it this Padan Aram later on. But it was originally the same area where Laban was. Unto Laban, son of Bethuel, or Laban, which has three words in it. La is L. B, they put the vowels in as they wish. So it might need another vowel. La'aban. Abba is father, and An is the highest. So it is the highest father, El. Son of Bethuel, or the daughter of Bath, daughter of El, the Armenian brother of Rebekah, mother of Jacob and Esau. So it says, Esau seeth that Isaac hath blessed Jacob. All right, so the one who will conquer with his foot shall conquer Yahweh. This is the one that's blessed to bring about the purposes of El. And hath sent him to Padan Aram to take himself from thence a wife. In his blessing him that he layeth a charge upon him, saying, Thou dost not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan, or from those who will be subdued. We want to subdue the Canaanites, or the lower flesh, and conquer it like the brute beast, put a bit in its mouth, use it to plant the fields and to make our crops. The brute beast has a purpose. It's to be subdued. It's the left side of the consciousness, the conscious thinking. This conscious world has a purpose. We have to subdue it and overcome it. So when our Heavenly Father made all of the world in Genesis chapter 1, all of us, the Elohim, were there. Let us make man as our form so that we can inhabit it. And we'll go down into this form. But we need to conquer it. Subdue it. That was the commandment laid upon Adam. The only commandment that El ever gave us is to subdue the land and have in subjection the beasts of the field, the carnal nature. So Jacob hearkeneth unto his father and unto his mother, and he goeth to Padan Aram. And Esau seeth that the daughters of Canaan are evil in the eyes of Isaac his father. And Esau goeth unto Ishmael, and taketh Mahalath, daughter of Ishmael, son, Abraham's son, sister of Nabahoth, unto his wife, to himself for a wife. Now we could get into those names, but that's another kind of a story. So Jacob goeth out from Beersheba, that's Sheba the south, and goeth towards Haran, which is in the north, on the east side of the river. And he toucheth a certain place and lodgeth there. For the sun hath gone in, and he taketh of the stones of the place, and maketh his pillows. Remember, the sun had gone in. Isn't that interesting? Literally, it doesn't say sun went down, but the sun went in. Because the sun never really goes down, does it? But it just goes within us, and we are more on the outside, the peripheral, in this outer consciousness where we're really not aware of this reality. So obviously, when darkness comes, we go to sleep. And so Jacob then was going to go to sleep and wanted to lay down and put his head upon this pillow to rest, because all men in this journey, we have to go to the wards of light. But before we get to the light, we have to rest. We have to go through the evening and then a morning. Every day, an evening and then a morning, because we have start off with ignorance and we get to the light, which is knowing. And as he's in this nightmare of this sleeping, which is this carnal world that we live in, this is the nightmare or the dream world, the temporary, the illusion. He dreams that he sees a ladder set up on the earth, and its head is touching the heavens. And lo, messengers of the divine are going up and down, coming down by it. Remember, this is Young's literal translation. I guess I didn't tell you that. So it's a little like the King James, but it's supposed to be the more literal translations by Young himself, which was supposed to be a great scholar. And lo, Jehovah is standing upon it, and he saith, I am Jehovah, the deity of Abraham thy father, and the deity of Isaac, and the land which thou art lying, to thee I give it, and to thy seed, and thy seed hath been as the dust of the land that thou hast broken forth westward, and eastward, and northward, and southward, and all the families of the ground have been blessed in thee and in thy seed. Now, notice a couple of things. Yahweh is blessing Abraham. He said, well, that's crazy. If this is a patriarch and he's, like a prophet, somebody we should look up to in this story, why are we going to listen to this guy if he's listening to Yahweh? Well, we all listen to Yahweh and to El. We all have the conscious world and the higher consciousness. And so this is the process that we all are going to go through. And remember, this is the seed. The promised seed hadn't yet come anyway. This is going to be a process. The promised seed is the Christ, the higher seed. A spiritual child, not the fleshly child. And notice that the promise that Yahweh gives is not the promise of eternal life, or like the stars of heaven for multitude, that you cannot number them, that El Elyon gave Abraham. But this is a different promise. And this promise is that of the flesh, or the dust of the earth. He says, your seed will be like the dust of the earth. So both El and Yahweh bless Abraham. But Yahweh's blessing is based on, you do this for me and I'll do this for you. And so it's these carnal commandments. And if we can live up to his word and do everything he says, then he will give us this blessing and multiply us like the dust, like this earthly carnal world. It says, lo, I am with thee, and I have kept thee whither thou goest, and I have caused thee to turn back into this ground. For I leave thee not till that I have surely done that which I have spoken to thee. And Jacob awaketh out of his sleep, and saith, surely Jehovah is in this place, and I knew not. And he feareth, and he said, how fearful is this place? This is nothing but the house of El, and this is the gate to the heavens. So it's interesting that Yahweh is at the base of this ladder on the ground. And Jacob, though, is seeing these angels coming down from El, from the heavens, on this ladder. He sees that this is a place or a gate that leads to a higher place. So in verse 18 it says, Jacob riseth early in the morning, and taketh the stone which he hath made his pillow, and maketh it a standing pillar. Well, now, I wonder if it was just a little rock, or perhaps this is a place where there would be an ancient temple. If we were to excavate this area, I bet you'd find probably a great obelisk or great pyramid that is there. And poureth oil upon its top. And he calleth the name of that place Bethel, or the house of El. Remember, Bethuel is a feminine, or the daughter of El. This is not the son or the house in the feminine sense, but it's, well, this is not the daughter in the feminine sense of El, but this is the house or the son of El. And yet, Luz is the name of the city at the first. Interesting, too, that Luz is where, to this day, we still have this word, Luciferius, or, like, I think in Spanish, that word means light, and in many other languages. And so Luz is the city of light. Now, why would it be the city of light and the city of El? Well, as we've said, El, soul, all, El, is the divine light. So in different languages, it had different names. And Jacob voweth a vow, saying, seeing the divine is with me, and hath kept me in his way, which I am going, and hath given to me bread to eat, and a garment to put on, when I have turned back in peace unto the house of my father, and Jehovah hath become my deity, then this stone which I have made a standing pillar is the house of El. And all that thou doest giveth to me, tithing I will tithe unto thee. So this is a little confusing here, because it seems to that Jacob doesn't know or cannot literally distinguish between two deities. But it becomes more clear when you understand these aren't deities. They're not bearded men that rule over the world, and one's angry, you worship me, and the other one's, oh, you worship me. But Yahweh's the one that demands some sort of recognition. The negative always demands that you start from there. And when you can find your footing, then you can bounce off that. When you see the bitter, then you know you don't want the bitter, and you're pursuing the sweet. So Yahweh is the base. And Yahweh's at the base of this ladder. He's not at the top of the ladder where El is, where the angels of El. Angel means the higher, and El, the higher elves. And those are the messengers of truth and light and love, and they're leading Jacob up the ladder to the higher. Now, I know a lot of you, or some of you may think that we're just trying to bend the verses to make it fit. The truth is that this truth that I'm telling you, that there are these two powers, one that is the carnal earthly power that has all dominion upon this physical earth. In the darkness, he has complete dominion. He is the deity of this darkness, vengeance, and hate. And he reigns supreme. And El is in the light. And he reigns over that, which is the reality, the eternal realm of love and goodness. But why would the statement be made then Yahweh will be my deity. Well, in the Hebrew here, it says, remember, it reads from right to left instead of as we do in English, left to right. So it says, so that I may return in peace to the house of my father, then shall be my Yahweh, Elohim. Well, Elohim is plural. And so Yahweh is in us. Remember, Elohim, why would our father El Elyon say unto the children of Israel, I'll send mine angel, and my name is in him? Because the I am that Jesus said he was, is the I am the resurrection, I am the life, I am the truth, I am the way. See? But before we know and have this enlightenment and we know the way, we're in the egotistical I am. So if you read this, if we could read this and it was translated correctly, we would understand that this Elohim is plural. And that there are many powers. Okay, they're not just one. So this is not talking about saying, he didn't actually say Yahweh will be my eternal, all-powerful, almighty. It doesn't say that. Because certainly Yahweh will never be either Jacob's almighty or our almighty. But we all have within ourselves, because we are the macrocosm, or I should say the microcosm, of the macrocosm. We're the exact duplicate of the entire universe. So just as the universe has up and down, left and right, male and female, we also have all of these things. And we have the lower ego. We have to submit or overcome or conquer that. So, as we said before, when Elohim made the heavens and the earth and all the animals and everything, he told Adam, subdue it and overcome it and have in submission the fish, subdue the fish of the sea and all of this. And so what he's saying is, now that I found this ladder and I'm going to go unto the light, when I get there to the house of my father, which is Laban, father El, then shall be my ego of the Elohim, one of my powers. I'll have brought this ignorance, the blindness, as I am Yahweh, that is my name, I recognize no other divine being. Then will Jacob's ignorant fleshly nature be awoken, and we'll have conquered that egotistical part of ourselves and given it enlightenment, so that our ego then is placed amongst the Elohim. So it says, and Jacob lifteth up his feet and goeth towards the land of the sons of the east. Again, this does not mean he went to China. It just meant he went to the sons of the east side of the river. That's all it means. And it's talking about the river Jordan. And so we're just talking about this little land east and north of that, which is Haran, where Laban was, or Father El. And he looketh, and lo, a well in the field. A well. There's always a well. But you see, this particular well is on the east. So it's going to be a river from the divine source. A well is the source of water, and all creatures need water to survive. We need it more than, we need air, we need light, we need food, and we need water. And these are very important things. But we will die without water. And so water is the stream of consciousness that comes from the light. And so he looketh, and lo, a well in the field, and lo, there were 3 droves of a flock crouching by it. Well, what kind of a flock or drove? Well, you'll see here, but obviously this is sheep. And sheep are animals. So every animal has a character, a nature. And the Bible uses these animals to represent different things. So sheep are very humble and they will follow, right? They're loving and gentle and fluffy. So they represent a humble, obedient, good nature. And we have that within us. But we also have the other side, the Canaan, which is to be subdued. We have the bestial area. Remember, Esau was all hairy like an animal. The Bible, as well as extra biblical books, Apocrypha and stuff, talks about Cain. When he got the mark, that was his hairiness. We see Nebuchadnezzar that became like a beast. and the kingdoms of this world became like beasts to rule over us. So the beast carnal nature then is something ferocious and wild and ravenous, carnivorous. But here is the sheep. They don't eat meat, they eat grass, like the cattle eat grass. So this is a symbol of the good nature of the flesh. We do have the flesh isn't all bad, but it must be conquered and defeated, and we need to change the nature of the lion to be like the sheep, like the lamb. They'll lie down together, the wolf and the lamb and all of this. So why is there 3 groves and they're watering from this well? Well, the well then is in the north and over the river in the east. So on the right side of the brain, which is the spiritual intuition, this is the Holy Spirit source of divine thoughts and consciousness. And that divine river feeds this humble nature, this animal that is our flesh, that is obedient to the light, to love, to truth, willingly. We've heard the expression, you lead a lamb to the slaughter. Well, they're so trusting. And Jesus talks about being the good shepherd. And we'll find out that Rebecca is also a shepherdess. She's a shepherd. She leads sheep. Who is the sheep that she is leading? Well, and where is she leading them? She's leading them to the well of the light. So in our bodies, in our natures, there is a purpose. And we do have these characters, all of them. We have the flesh and we have the spirit. And we have to know which party is the right party and what's really going on here. So here's where we really get deep. And this is kind of getting into mysteries and esoteric understanding that I don't think maybe anyone really anywhere in the world has ever really understood, because this information was hidden within the parable for all of these thousands of years and was written for us, upon whom the ends of the world has come, so that we can learn. I mean, think about the world around us, the carnal world. They're learning too, at the very same pace that we're learning. And the fleshly world is learning secrets and mysteries. They claim they have bombs and gunpowder and telecommunication, and knowledge has increased, but in their world, they don't know how to handle this knowledge, and they're using it for greed and for selfish gain. But at the same time, the saints then are, like we've said, if we see the bitter, then we can grasp that that's not the right way, and it kind of adjusts us towards the light. So what are these 3 droves of sheep? We've said they're certain natures, and sheep are very innocent, and they can be led by the shepherd, and they hear the shepherd's voice. But there are 3 different groups of sheep. Now, why would that be? Well, remember that Abraham had 3 wives. Now, I'm only bringing this up because what does the 3 mean? Well, if Abraham had 3 wives and we all came from Abraham, then everybody came from one of those wives. Just as we've all come from Jacob, and at the same time, we come from one of his 12 sons. And so 3 then is a number that goes back to the very beginning. The Trinity has 3 in it. It's breaking everything down into these 3 things. If you were going to break it down. Now you can break it down further into 2 things, male and female. We've talked about that. Even the Apostle Paul says this. This is to do with eternal progression, because he says that in the resurrection, there'll be those who will be like the sun, and those like the moon, and others like the stars, and each star differs in star and glory. Because usually when you see how a number is, a particular number or symbol is used, we can apply that across the board. So in Paul's illustration, he says that in the earthly world, before we get immortality, there are 4 gradations. He says that there are fish, birds, mammals, and men. 4 then is an earthly number, like the 4 directions of the wind, or the 4 cardinal points and that kind of thing. It's to do with this world. 3 then has to do something with light. Light is something heavenly. We see there are 3 colors: red, blue, and yellow. And they make up all the other colors. So they're heavenly, right? 3 is heavenly. And so this is why there are 3 gradual progressions after we have immortality, like the sun, moon, and the stars. And at the same time, each star different star in glory, so that it represents eternity. So in one of the stages of our immortality, we get to progress forever. We see also where there are the 12 apostles, and there are 3, Peter, James, and John, that seem to be the pillars. And all these words are very important, pillars. You know, you've probably heard some of these Kabbalist teachings about these pillars. Well, then you begin to realize that early Christianity certainly were involved in these mystery schools. Remember the phrase where Paul says in Galatians that Peter, James, and John gave Barnabas and Paul the right hand of fellowship. It uses that term in the Bible, the right hand of fellowship. What do you think it means? Is that a specific term? Yes. Right hand, good. Left, bad, right? And the hand of fellowship is a handshake. And so they did have these secret symbols. And this has come down to in Freemasonry, where they have this certain handshake that says that they're brothers. Well, that right hand of fellowship meant that Paul and Barnabas were now brothers with Peter, James, and John. Interesting that it's 3, Peter, James, and John, because they represented the authority, the heavenly, like the 3 colors, which is heavenly. So who are these 3 droves of sheep? Well, they're on the east side of the river. So that would be the right side, or the good side, or the heavenly. And we'll see this all the way through. Because remember, these 3 droves of sheep were originally found up there with Laban. Laban's on the east side of the river. He's in the north, and he lives in a place called Haran. Well, Ra, or the highest light. That's up there in the north on the east side of the river. It's the highest light in Haran. And Laban is Abba El. So that's Father El that lives up there. And so Laban, remember, is the one who gave Jacob his wife. Well, basically, there's 2 covenants. These are 2 ways for Jacob to become one, to produce a family, to go forward. He's going to have a well, he's going to have sheep, he's going to have cattle, right? And he's going to have these 2 wives. Leah is La Yah, which is El Yah. So it is the Yahweh that is divine, or El, or powerful, right? And that is the old covenant. And then there is the Ra-El, or the Ra-Shel, Ra-El. And yes, we've done videos on that the C there is not necessarily to be pronounced. It's Ra-El. And the rabbis will tell you that. So Ra is El. And that's the higher covenant. So we've got the flesh, and we've got the spirit. And Father El is reigning over it. And so when Jacob comes, he's the one, this human being in the deck of cards. He is the fool. He is the joker. We're the one going along like Jason and the Argonauts, going around the wheel. We're the one traversing the wheel, and going through all the houses and all the experiences, and going and learning all these natures and conquering all of this worldly nature, which is this garden-like area with all these carnal zoological animals. So Jacob's working 7 years. Why 7 years? Because, in other words, we're going to keep on working until the end of the cycle, and then we'll rest. So this 7 years means it's really until it's finished, right? Just like when Jesus said you'll be forgiven 70 times 7. The only difference there is 70 has a 10 in it, because it's both cyclical in time and 10 being earthly and spatial. So we forgive over and over until it's finished, and we do it completely, which is the symbolism of 10. So Laban then is going to give this man, the human being, represents all of us, that we're all from the loins of Jacob, right? 72 souls went down into Egypt. And we'll read that here in a little bit. But those 72 are all the nations, and everybody comes from Jacob's loins. So Laban has some sheep. Now, they're innocent, they're pure, and they're drinking from the waters on the east side from the source from Laban's well, or Father El. And the sheep are innocent and pure, and they're drinking. But they're being watched over by Father El and his daughter, Rachel, and they're this covenant that comes from him. And he has these sheep. Now, he doesn't at the time divide them into 3 herds of sheep or droves. But Jacob does that, because as Jacob's working for 7 years, this endless task, this pursuit of light, pursuit of the rest at the end of the 7-year cycle, where he now accomplishes this orgasm, this lifting of the veil, which is the understanding and the knowing of who he really is. After he's conquered Yahweh, right? He wrestled with the angel Yahweh, and when the sun came up, then Yahweh couldn't beat him anymore. He defeated him, because when the light comes, the darkness is over. So Jacob is working for his beloved wife, Ra'el, the rays of El, the light of El. But Father El, in his wisdom, says, we don't have a custom of giving the greatest first. We don't give you the daylight first and then the night. We give you the night and then the day. You've got, Jacob, you're working and striving and growing to have this covenant, to know thyself, to have thy sheep in subjection, and to guide and direct them like a shepherd. You're doing all these wonderful things. You're being hunted by your brother, the flesh, and you're going towards the light. And you want the covenant of love and absolute beauty, the rays of the light or the knowledge of El right away. But you can't have that. So here's what I'm going to do. It's kind of like a little trick, right? It really is, because we're not aware at first that we've got to go through all this pain until we get into the pain. We don't realize how bad this pain is going to be, the struggle, but it's worth it. And even Jacob admitted that. He acknowledged that it was fair, and he went ahead and said, okay, fine, I'll work another 7 years for Rachel. So what does he do? What is his work, to acquire these covenants, this knowledge, this lifting of the veil, this unity, the oneness, the knowing? Well, you've got to herd sheep. You've got to guide the sheep, the natures of this body, this physical nature. You've got to lead them to the light. And so Laban says, listen, here's your wages. After you work 7 years, you can go away, and I'll give you these sheep. So Jacob then decides to make a deal with Laban. He says, I'll work for these years, but you've got to give me some wages. I need some sheep and stuff. I need to have some materiality. I need to bring these sheep into subjection. This is my purpose. And you're the one who made the sheep. They're your sheep. This is your well. I'm working for you. I'm working for the light. So I'll tell you what, we'll herd these sheep, and I will get to keep all the sheep that have these little speckles, the stripes. I get them. 3 different types of sheep that would be there. These are the 3 droves or kinds of sheep. So the first kind of sheep are the nikudim. So that means that there's some kind of isolated spot, right? Maybe big spots that are they're not connected to any other spots. They're not like stripes or anything. And then you've got this akudim in the Hebrew, which means that there are 10 different spots, like the Tim Sephiroth. You can understand them like little containers that are developing from the one spot. From the big, large spots, you get these smaller spots. So it's graduating into more distinguished abilities. We've gone from the development of the first sign of knowledge, or this distinction, to a greater groupings of knowledge. So it's the stages of identifications and clarifications and variables. And then finally there is this Verudim. These would be the three that he'd get to keep. Now the Verudim, the third group, these are like combined with the spots and the speckles, and the spots aren't just isolated, but they go and they touch, have little blur into other spots. In other words, you kind of bring all this picture together. You start with just grasping something very important, and then you define all of that importance in the next stage, and then finally you get to the stage where everything is connected and you have understanding. So what Jacob is really doing is watering, taking care of, and shepherding his own basic natures and variables and distinctions, and learning all this wisdom and experience until he achieved, at the end of the 7 years, he achieved this harmonization of all of this knowledge. And then he would be able to use it. He would have something useful. So you see, these sheep belong to Laban. The same kind of thing happens with Moses when he goes to Jethro's mountain and he marries Jethro's daughter. Now, same situation. Jethro's daughter Zipporah was this shepherdess coming to the well, and Moses came and got water out, helped her water these sheep, and was like Jesus, a shepherd, and the sheep represents a lot of times we think that the sheep are peoples. Remember, Abraham had 3 wives, and those are 3 nations, but really it represents the stages of all of us. We're all either living in the beginning stage of our learning, or we go to a more advanced stage, but all of the sheep belong to El, Father El. But it's Jacob's job, our job as human beings, to shepherd and guide them, and through this we get to keep the harmony. We get to advance and understand these natures and bring them together and lead them to water. So Jacob then spends a lot of time shepherding these sheep. He came from this place called Beersheba, which is the fountain of the 7. And he comes to Haran, which is the light of On, or the highest light. And he's going to build a family there. He's going to acquire a wife and a covenant. And he's going to receive his wages. And then when he gets enlightened and experiences all of this accomplishment and harmonizes his flocks and acquires a covenant and a purpose, then he crosses the river back again and he goes back to the world. See, we all have to eventually come into the land. But until we get this knowledge and this wisdom and have control of our families and work through the 7 years and accomplish this understanding, we're not going to be able to conquer the land of Canaan. Once we get all that down, okay, we had to flee from Esau, right, and go up there and work for a while and learn some things and acquire some knowledge and harmony in our life and get our wives and get everything together. And then we can cross over into the promised land and defeat the giants that have taken over the carnal nature, the left side of the conscious thinking, which is being ruled over by brute beasts. And there's you got to go in there and conquer this land, kill wild beasts and domesticate it. And so Jacob goes to the land of the east of the river Jordan, and he looks, and there's a well and a field, and there are these 3 droves of sheep crouching by the well. And from that well they watered the droves, and there was a great stone on the mouth of the well. When thither all the droves had been gathered, and they have rolled the stone from off the mouth of the well, and have watered the flock, then they have turned back the stone on the mouth of the well to its place. Now, follow along here. There's a reason why this well has a stone that has to be rolled away. And it says, Jacob saith to them, my brethren, from whence are ye? And they said, we are from Haran, or the highest light. And he saith unto them, Have ye known Laban, which is La Abba, father El, son of Nahor? And they said, We have known. And he saith to them, Hath he peace? And they saith, Peace, and lo, Rael, his daughter, is coming, or the light of El. See, he's father El, but here's the light of El, his daughter. She's coming with the flock. Well, the flock is all of the material things and experiences and variables that we're going to be able to distinguish and learn and grow and lead, right? That will provide for us the wool, the clothing, our living. And he saith, the rays of light that are coming from our Father light, she's coming with the flock. She's got the flock. That's something Jacob needs. He needs that woman. It's very important to become one, to have this understanding, because with the woman is all these sheep. And so he says, Lo, the day is still great. I'm going to show here in a minute what the correct translation is of that. It doesn't actually mean the day is great, but, and it's not time for the cattle to be gathered. Water ye the flock and go delight yourselves. And they say, We are not able till that all the droves be gathered together, and they have rolled away the stone from the mouth of the well, and we have watered the flock. So think about this. Here's Jacob. He's going to this place that he didn't live. And he comes across this well in the field and all these sheep. And he doesn't personally know these people, but he knows who they are. But they don't know who he is yet. And he's saying, Hey, why don't you go and gather the sheep together and water them and then go feed them? Like, what's he telling them what to do for? Well, obviously, somehow he had some particular knowledge is what it's trying to say. He had something that they needed. The flesh has something that the spirit needs. He's going to go through all this work and he's going to herd these sheep. He's got some knowledge that the higher nature needs, and this is why he's got to go there to get his wife. So then he says, while he was speaking with them, Rachel, or the light of El, came with her father El's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. And it came to pass, when Jacob saw the light of El, the daughter of Father El, his mother's brother, and the sheep that belong to Father El, his mother's brother, that Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. Notice it was Moses that watered the flock for Jethro's sheep too, and he became a herder of Jethro's sheep. So now here Jacob becomes a herder of Laban's sheep. And this is a priesthood. So he marries the daughter, and this is how one becomes a king. You form a divine marriage or a wedding with the high king's daughter and the earthly king's son. And this is how you have unity in the world. The flesh and the spirit must be unified. The lower kingdom of Judea must be unified with the northern kings. And there was one king, and the stick of Ephraim and the stick of Judah shall be one in thine hand. That's what the goal is, to unify the flesh under the authority of the spirit. So here's where we get to understand that these sheep represent all the flocks of man, the congregation, the great people that Jesus will gather. He's going to gather them all. But they are divided into three because just like Abraham had 3 wives, there are lots of different peoples in the world. And we have this temple, which is the body. We have the most holy. We have the inner court and the outer court, which is that of the Gentiles. Now that is the body. So these are the three: the spiritual, the soulical, and the fleshly. And we need to save all of them. Jesus, when he said, I have other sheep which are not of this fold, he was telling the Judeans that they weren't the only children of the Lord. And there were various children, and it had nothing to do with race. How could that be? I mean, the sheep that Jethro had was just like the sheep that Laban had, but Moses became a herder of Jethro's sheep, and he put the veil or the carnal commandments. And so he was giving the laws that built and held up the structure of the base, the outer, the more material. And then Elihu, which is this prophet that got in a fiery chariot and ascended in his astral body that testifies of the highest, or the body of light, which is Christ. Remember, on the Mount of Transfiguration, there was Jesus, Moses, and Elijah. Jesus is the highest, then Elihu, and then Moses, which is the body of Moses, which the Archangel Michael is fighting with over the devil. So in every one of us, we have these three departments. We have the spiritual, the soulical, and the physical. And in the entire world, we have these three kind of like priesthoods. So we have the carnal commandments of Judaism that makes the structure of society that needs to be cleansed and, brought back into its proper place. And we have also the highest priesthood of Melchizedek. And so Jacob had 3 droves of sheep. The one that was harmonious, that where the spots came together, which was accomplished by divination or by a seeking of a divine answer. And so the harmonization is the knowing. And so this 1/3 of the sheep that were striped, achieved by divination through Jacob, was the higher priesthood. But that means that Laban represents the highest king priest, the priesthood of Melchizedek. And Jacob took that higher priesthood and went to the land of promise and established that priesthood there. So remember, Judaism was not the highest priesthood, but like it says in Revelation chapter 11, cast out the courtyard. It's been given unto the nations. They'll trample it, the holy city, or the outer court, for 1,260 days. That represents that the material, physical world is not in harmony. It needs to be cleansed, and it will be trampled upon. But Judaism does not have the higher priesthood of Melchizedek. That was up there with Laban at his house. And in our Old Testament, or in our Bible, it doesn't really explain in depth where that higher priesthood went. But we know in the book of Daniel that that tree that reached unto heaven was eventually cut down. So the higher priesthood was gone. But it was preserved in Jacob. So remember, Jacob only got the sheep that were spotted, speckled, or striped. So all of the 3 priesthoods came through Jacob. But it was through this higher priesthood, through divination and Jacob's skill, that he achieved this one group of sheep, which in that group, there was this harmonious thing where he achieved this understanding. And that was the highest priesthood that was in Jacob. Jacob was before Moses. So by the time Moses came along, the people had come to this place where they did not and could not bear the higher priesthood, the light body. Moses veiled the higher priesthood and made the appendage of the Aaronic priesthood. And so today, all we have is the Aaronic, or the government, the carnal commandments, but the other third, which would be Elihu, which has not yet returned. Christ is going to come and he's going to return. That's the higher priesthood. But Elihu has left the earth, and we don't have that priesthood either at the temple of Artemis in the mysteries. What we still have is these carnal commandments, the law, but it's very, very bad. It's created a stumbling block, and it's beating their fellow servants and stuff like this. So look at the analogy here. Elihu left the earth on a fiery chariot. He's going to return. Jesus left the earth, and he's going to return. But Moses, he didn't do that. Moses, it says that when he died, his body still had vigor. His eyes were not dim. I mean, he was young. but at 120 he died. And all it says is that the archangel Michael and the devil have been having a war, a battle for this body, which is the physical body, the material world that we live in. So Moses didn't leave. He's still here, but there's a great battle going on, and it's, the devil's got his hand around Moses' throat, and he's lying to us, and we've been deceived. Moses didn't get to go into the promised land, and Moses is just being held by ransom. Literally, there's a war. Well, when Moses and Elijah return, it means that a government that is true, that is enlightened, and a spiritual priesthood from Elihu, both of these, the flesh and the astral, have got to come to bear witness to the highest spiritual priesthood that is the truth, that is still lost in the mysteries, buried in the ground from certain teachings that one day will be dug up, probably in Mesoamerica, where the city of Enoch or Enochic land was, and will recover the tenets of this higher priesthood. And this will be the day when the stick of Judah and the stick of Ephraim will be reunited as one. But back to our story. It seems that Jacob is the one who had the power to roll the stone, even though they didn't have that power. Right? But at the same time, Jacob couldn't have done it by himself. He had to wait until he saw Rachel, or the rays of the sun. And together, in this unity, they were able to do it. And it was just as the sun was in the sky. And this is the same story that you have there with Mary Magdalene, that came early at dawn when the sun began to raise in the sky and the stone was rolled away and Jesus rose. This is the story of the power of the light, of enlightenment, of truth. And so it says, Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. Then Jacob kissed Rachel. Oh, then there's this cordial kiss. They meet. They have some touching, even an intimate touching. When this unity happens, now you really got something. You got a flow of energy that is powerful. And he lifted up his voice and he wept. Now that's the tears of joy. And that's the orgasm. And Jacob told Rachel that he was his father's relative and that he was Rebekah's son. So she ran and told her father. And then it came to pass when Father El heard the report about Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him, and he brought him into his house so that he told Laban all these things. And Laban said to him, surely you are my bone and my flesh. And he stayed with him for a month. A whole cycle, one full 30-day cycle. The 30-day cycle where Jacob spent time there with Laban and they had this kissing was not the actual wedding. But at this point, that's when Jesus came to the world about 2,000 years ago, which is when it represented the sun rising on the horizon. And that was in the springtime. So I know it's getting long and we're over an hour now, but I've got to share this with you to conclude. But it says from right to left in Hebrew, and he said, look, yet daylight, it is still daylight, yet broad, not time for it is to be gathered together the livestock. I don't believe that's the correct translation. If you look at this carefully, it says, and he said, look, yet day, and that word broad means it is growing. You see, the day is beginning to dawn. That's really what it's saying. It is beginning to grow. So let's click on that word. 1419. Now, the definition they say is great. But it's from the word gadal. And what does it mean? To grow up. To become great. So it's not just already great, but it's growing to become. It's rising in the sky, or it's growing like a plant. Advancing, becoming, grow long, grow up. It's all kinds of different, I don't know why they translate it so many different ways. But I really don't think it means to be great, but to be growing great. Well, how can you be sure, Dave? Well, you think you're smarter than these other scholars? Well, the reason I know that it is not already great, but growing, is because Jacob rolled the stone when he saw Resh El, or the rays of El. That's the only way he could even do it. He didn't have the power to do it during the darkness. But when he saw the rays of El coming, then he was able to move the stone. So I believe that it's the light beginning to rise. And that we can take as a great encouragement, because we see in the world today that knowledge is increasing. The light is beginning to dawn. And we are going to see the return of Christ, the brightness that will dispel the darkness. Jesus was resurrected. The stone was removed from that cave. When Mary Magdalene came to see the risen Lord, it was the dawn. It was specifically the dawn, not the noon time. And this is another story of Jacob running out to meet Rachel, like Jesus meeting Mary Magdalene. And the fact that Laban says, "You're bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh," that's interesting, because that's what Adam says of Eve, right? Bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. A man shall leave his father and his mother and stick unto his wife. So Jacob is going, and he's going to become one with Rachel. Anyway, guys, looks like we're way over an hour here. I had a little bit more I wanted to share with you. We were going to continue reading on here. There's a lot of interesting things throughout the entire Bible, of course, but we better leave it there, and I'm going to go ahead and get this uploaded, and hope you have a wonderful evening. May the Lord bless you. We'll see you tomorrow, guys. Have a good one.